Well, let's start with the beginning. Why did you want to make this film?
Well, actually, the original idea was my co-writer Glenn Montgomery's idea was about this woman who doesn't mother her child, and so he came to me with the idea, and it appealed to me, I guess, because I think that mothers can't get it right. It's this kind of sort of sacred thing, and I think we have this idea of a perfect mother, and I think that socially, and I think that we kind of pretend that we pretend that there aren't people who don't want to do that, who don't want to be mothers, who don't have we just talk about it as it's this kind of the most natural thing in the world, and what completes you as a woman, and blah blah blah, and all this kind of stuff. So for me it was interesting, this woman, this very alternative kind of mother. I mean, so alternative that in fact she doesn't actually mother her child, but to present her as someone who isn't a monster. She's complex, she can care, she can be tender and all of these things, but still she doesn't feel capable of being a mother.
And is it because you wrote the script together and you did that before, right? Earlier?
What do you mean?
Well, at the first film.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
And how does that process go, writing it together?
So, one of us will come up with an idea, and it'll be something that we both can be interested in, because sometimes we come up with ideas that the other one isn't interested in, so, but, and then we'll both do a lot of research on it. So for The Other Side of Sleep, it was about, a woman, a girl's body being found. So, and actually that came from a newspaper article about a young woman's body who was found. So then we do a lot of research independently, then we come together, we talk a lot, we talk out the ideas. And then over a period of weeks, we'll build up an outline of the story, like a first draft outline of a story. And then one of us will start to write the draft of the script, the first draft of the script. And then, we'll talk to each other, but really one of us is writing the first draft, and then the second draft will be written by the other person. And we don't sit together and type.
No, exactly.
But we do talk a lot,
And so you go back and forth with the drafts.
Yeah.
And did you, because you had that experience earlier, what did you learn from that first experience which you could use in this second one?
From the writing of the first one? Actually, maybe that we don't sit together, because with The Other Side of Sleep, we did sit together a little bit more, actually. Which I think can work for some genres of writing. Maybe for comedy it can be a really good thing, because you're coming up with lines and, it's all... But these films, there's not so many laughs. So I think to get into that space of the character, in a way, you kind of need to be on your own. So it's kind of an intense thing, it's quite a deep thing. So I think you have to kind of get into that writer space and sort of disappear a little bit, we don't go out that much when we're writing.
Yeah, but I can imagine, because what you say, because it's such a deep story that it's. I found it very interesting that you wrote it together. That there are two voices actually behind this story, because it's so profound and so sincere. So I thought it was very interesting. Because
we know each other for years, though. We know each other since, for 15 years. We studied together in college, so we're actually very close friends. So often we'll know what the other person will think about something. We do have quite it's a great working relationship. It's very, I find it, very rewarding. So.
Yeah. And how did you knew how did the casting process went?
The casting process, well, we started with Margaret, and. We sent the script to Rachel, who, I don't know if you're familiar with her from Muriel's Wedding and 6 Feet Under and so on, but she for me is very interesting for the character, because she tends to play people who are not really like Margaret. She tends to play much more outgoing people, much more kind of gregarious people, sassy kind of people, that's kind of, and that's, I think that's because that's kind of the person that she is, So for me, it's very interesting to put Rachel and kind of juxtapose her with Margaret, and obviously she plays Margaret, but she brings something a little bit extra, because because she has this kind of sort of girlishness that comes through in Margaret at times, you know, but something I really like about her, that she can seem very young at times in the film, and then, you know, very like a really mature woman then at other times, and I like that kind of split in her. And even at times she brought this almost immaturity to Margaret, which I thought was interesting in terms of, you know, the decisions that Margaret makes. So, but what happened was we sent her the script, she liked it, and I think she liked it partly because it was an unusual character for her. Then she took on the role, and then we met in LA, and we talked through in detail through the script, like quite intensely for 3 days, and got to know each other a bit because we hadn't met before, which was unusual for me. I've never cast somebody before without meeting them, but I'd watched, you know, everything that she had been in before. But I guess, you know, if we hadn't, you know, clicked or got on in LA, maybe we could have like sort of sidled out of the thing a little bit somehow. But luckily, you know, there was no need, and we got on really well, and she really understood Margaret, and she's very interested in developing a very rich psychology for the character, and she's really interested in that kind of end of things in a very intricate way. So she was very happy to delve deep, which was great. And then with Barry is who plays Joe, is a young Irish actor he's done about 3 or 4 other feature films, but with smaller roles in them. So Joe would be his biggest role up to this point. But I met him at a workshop in Dublin of young actors. I was just doing a one-off workshop with them, and he brought in the scene where he played a 50-year-old man, really strange casting. But he made it make sense. It was like really incredible to see. There's something kind of like it was to me, you know, I had to really think about how he could make it make sense because the casting was so strange. But actually it's because he made it make sense through him. He made the line, I mean, obviously out of the context of the full piece, but, you know, he made it, he understood it and made it understandable through him. So for me, this is kind of a pretty unique thing. And is very much to do with his instincts as an actor. So, you know, I was immediately very impressed by him at that point. And then when we started casting Joe, which was a couple of years later, he was actually the first person we saw. And I kind of sort of knew I probably wanted him to play the part, but being extremely diligent, we saw many, many other people afterwards just in case kind of thing.
How many did you
I
saw?
mean, I'm trying to think. I mean, 30, 35 people maybe. But he always was, you know, kind of head and shoulders above the rest. I was just being diligent, me and my casting director, you know. And then we did a call back with him, and it was just so clear at that point. It was, you know, that we stopped looking at
and
that
I read
point.
that he, as a preparation, that he started for 4 or 5 months going out with his friends in the film.
Yeah.
Was that his idea?
Yeah, well, most of the guys in the gang, with the exception of the lead guy, the kind of the most aggressive guy, aren't actors. They're the kids, they're young guys that we did an open casting for. And so I wanted them to sort of have a, you know, to operate with that kind of like gang feel, you know, and to have an easy shorthand with each other, and, you know, because they were going to be improvising in the background quite a bit. So we did a good few improvisation sessions with them, like in a, you know, in a rehearsal room. But then one day Barry says to me, "Oh yeah, I was hanging out with the guys there, you know, last week, and they were sort of hanging out in character. Now, obviously not to the extent of, you know, the trouble that the gang get themselves in at all, but they were kind of going around Dublin being a bit." So I was like, okay, well, just be careful to get into anything dodgy. But yeah, so it was kind of between them, you know, and actually they've maintained a friendship, you know, he's still in contact with them. And
that's so cool,
you know,
that's
yeah.
amazing. And is it, because while watching the film, it really sucks you in, so you're very into the story, and then suddenly you notice, you feel the chemistry between them, and it gives you this shock and this weird feeling. And was it also for you during writing, or did you from the beginning have the idea that this will develop, or did it surprise yourself as well?
Between Margaret and Joe?
Yeah.
No, it wasn't initially the idea. We started with this character of Margaret, and then I think from pretty early on we knew that there would be a surrogate coming into the story, which obviously Joe is a surrogate. But the chemistry between them, or the change in the relationship, that evolved quite naturally, because we asked ourselves what happens when you affect this kind of intimacy between two people, and this sort of artificial mother-son situation, because it's artificial, what will happen, what might happen then. And so it grew out of that, really.
Yeah, interesting. Did it surprise you that you came up with that in the end? And
I don't really, that would kind of put me outside of what I do if it surprised me, that I would be kind of looking at myself, and I don't really, it's just happening, so it just happens. And then it just evolved quite naturally, to be honest.
Yeah. And how is it, because the film was produced with producers in various countries, right? Luxembourg
and the Netherlands and Ireland.
Yeah, how does it work practically?
In terms of the actual filmmaking? So the way it works is that, you end up with crew from the various countries, and you end up with, we shot half of the film in Luxembourg. And there was post-production in Luxembourg and also in the Netherlands. So this wasn't the first time I did this, though. On the Other Side of Sleep is the same thing, I mean, all the countries obviously, they finance the film. So so for me, it's always worked out really well, and there's always a very good kind of mesh of people coming together. So
you travel back and forth the entire time?
In post-production, yes, depending on how much. But, for example, my edit always happens in Dublin, so I don't, I'm not for a long period abroad. But we did, have to obviously go to Luxembourg for locations, scouting and all of that, and for some casting, and then, for half of the shoot. I think that's kind of the way it, works quite a lot, in terms of this co-production modeling in Europe. That's my understanding.
Yeah, maybe I thought maybe even more, because it's the business is getting maybe more and more difficult. So it's would you see the future that it will have more like this co-productions between various countries?
Well, that's the only model I know. I mean, I do know obviously some films in Europe are equity financed or whatever, but I'm not familiar with that system at all. So yeah, I mean, I think, and it seems to be an increasing number of agreements between countries and treaties to make it easier as well. So to have this reciprocal thing going on, because actually it's very hard to finance a film fully out of one country, especially the size of Ireland. So
yeah, exactly. Okay, last, I'm very curious, will the next film also be with Glenn?
Yes, it is, and it's written. So
what is it about? Short.
It's about a remote Christian community living in Germany in woods. Okay. And it's about one day a young man walks out of the woods into the community, and it's about how they change each other.
And it's already done. When will it be?
It's already written. It's being financed. So at the moment, so we're hoping to shoot in the next year, hopefully. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much.